The ambulance bay doors slammed open at 3:47 a.m., and the man who stumbled through them was already dying on his feet. Claire Bennett caught him before he hit the floor. 16 hours into her shift, her scrubs stiff with someone else's blood, she didn't think, she reacted. One hand found the wound low on his left side, blood pulsing dark and steady between her fingers. Gunshot. Close range. Maybe 20 minutes old. Don't call anyone, he said, teeth clenched around the words. Please. Not security. Not the police. Nobody. Every protocol Claire had ever memorized told her to hit the intake button on the wall behind her. Gunshot wounds triggered automatic reporting. It was law, not preference. Her thumb hovered an inch from the button. Then she looked at his eyes. Not pleading. Calculating, even now, even bleeding out on her linoleum like he was already 3 moves ahead of whatever she chose. And underneath that, something rawer. Fear that had nothing to do with dying. She didn't hit the button. Instead, she looped his arm over her shoulder and half-dragged him down the side hallway, past the nurse's station where Priya was buried in a chart and didn't look up, into the supply closet where the hospital kept saline bags and suture kits nobody counted closely enough to notice missing. You're insane, she muttered, snapping on gloves, kicking the door shut with her heel. You know that. I could lose my license for this. Then why are you doing it? She didn't answer. She didn't have one yet. The closet was 8 feet by 10, lit by a single humming fluorescent tube, shelved floor to ceiling with the ordinary machinery of survival: gauze, tape, adrenaline, thread. Claire had performed field triage in worse places. She'd done 2 tours as an Army trauma nurse before Boston General, had stitched wounds by flashlight in conditions this closet almost felt luxurious by comparison. Her hands didn't shake. They never did. That was the thing nobody understood about her. The calm wasn't bravery, it was training, muscle memory doing the job her racing heart couldn't. She cut his shirt open. Tailored, she noticed distantly, the kind of stitching that cost more than her monthly rent. A tattoo traced along his ribs, dark ink half hidden beneath the blood, a design she didn't have time to study. She packed the wound, found the bleeder, tied it off with fingers that had done this 100 times in far worse light. Bullet's still in there, she said. I can slow the bleeding. I can't dig for it here. You need a surgeon or not a closet and a nurse who's about to get fired. I have a surgeon, he said, breath ragged. Just get me stable enough to move. Who are you? He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes like he was deciding how much truth she could survive. Dante. Just that. No last name. She didn't push. 40 minutes later, with the bleeding controlled and his pulse steadier than it had any right to be, 2 men in dark coats slipped through the ambulance bay without a sound and lifted him between them like he weighed nothing. At the door, Dante turned back once. You didn't ask what I was worth, he said. Everyone always asks what I'm worth. Then he was gone, and Claire was alone in a supply closet with blood on her hands and a question she couldn't shake. What exactly had she just agreed to? She didn't know yet that the 2 men in the parking garage had photographed her badge. She didn't know his last name was Moretti, and that Boston hadn't seen a name like his walk quietly into a hospital and quietly back out in 11 years. Claire Bennett was 29 years old, and by her own accounting she had exactly 2 things going right in her life: her license and her brother. She lived in a 1-bedroom walk-up in Dorchester with a radiator that clanked like it was haunted and a window unit that fought a losing war against Boston summers. She'd chosen the apartment for one reason. It was 15 minutes from Boston General and 20 from the community college where her younger brother, Sam, was 2 semesters from an engineering degree he was terrified he wouldn't finish paying for. Their mother had died 4 years ago. Cancer, slow and expensive, the kind that ate through a family's savings long before it finished the job. Their father had left when Claire was 12 and Sam was 6, and had never come back to explain why. So it had always been the 2 of them, and after their mother, it was Claire who signed Sam's financial aid forms, who picked up extra shifts every time his tuition bill came due, who told him, always without exception, that she had it handled, even on the nights she sat at her kitchen table doing math that didn't work. He had a rule. One rule, unbreakable. She did not take money she hadn't earned, and she did not let anyone buy their way into deciding what she owed them. She'd watched her mother's dignity get chipped away by hospital bills and well-meaning relatives who gave with strings attached. Claire had promised herself she'd rather work herself into the ground than become someone's obligation. At Boston General she was known for two things. The first was her hands, steady in codes that made newer nurses freeze, the one they called into the worst traumas because she didn't flinch. The second was a small brass button she kept clipped inside her scrub pocket, worn smooth at the edges. It had come off her father's old army jacket, one of the only things he'd left behind. She didn't know why she still carried it. Maybe because it was proof that even people who left could once have stood for something. That night, the night before Dante Moretti bled through her supply closet floor, she'd spent 40 minutes past the end of her shift sitting with Mrs. Alvarez in room 214, an 81-year-old widow with no family in the city, holding her hand until the sedative took hold and the fear left her face. Nobody had asked Claire to stay. Nobody was paying her to. She'd stayed because leaving felt like abandoning someone, and she'd made a private vow a long time ago never to be the kind of person who let dignity slip away from someone just because it was inconvenient to hold on to. That was who she was walking into that ambulance bay, exhausted, wrung out, and one bad decision away from losing everything she'd built. A woman who didn't know how to walk past someone in need, even when every rational instinct told her to. Sam called her on her way home that morning, voice tight in the way it got when he was trying to sound casual and failing. "Tuition bill came in," he said. "It's bad this semester, Claire. Like really bad." "How bad?" He told her. She did the math in her head while pretending she wasn't, the way she always did, running through which shifts she could pick up, which bills could wait another 2 weeks. "I'll figure it out," she said. "I always do. You don't have to carry this alone, you know." "I know." She didn't believe it. He never quite did. She hung up, let herself into her apartment and stood under a shower that never ran quite hot enough, blood, someone else's twice over now, sluicing pink off her hands. She thought about the man in the closet. No last name, no explanation, gone into the dark with 2 silent men and a debt she couldn't name. She told herself it didn't matter. He was a stranger with money and a bullet wound and a story that wasn't hers to know. She'd done her job, more than her job, and by morning it would be a story she never repeated, not even to Sam. She was wrong, and some small, uneasy part of her already suspected it. Because as she'd cut his ruined shirt away, she'd caught a flash of the tattoo along his ribs, a compass rose circling a single word in old-style script, and something about it had snagged in her memory like a hook she couldn't yet name. She fell asleep before she could place it. It would be 2 days before she understood exactly whose hands she'd stopped from bleeding out. 2 days later, Claire found the coffee. It was sitting outside her apartment door at 6:15 a.m., still steaming, a small paper cup from a shop she'd never once mentioned by name to anyone at work. Oat milk, no sugar, exactly how she took it. There was no note. There didn't need to be. She left it untouched on the step and went to work with her heart doing something complicated in her chest. He found her at Boston General that afternoon, not in the ER but in the cafeteria, sitting alone at a corner table like he'd been waiting for the right moment rather than announcing himself. Dante Moretti in daylight was a different animal than Dante Moretti bleeding on her closet floor. Pressed charcoal suit, dark hair combed back, a stillness to him that made the air around their table feel thinner, like the whole room had quietly adjusted its pressure to accommodate him without knowing why. "You're supposed to be dead, or at least in a hospital bed that isn't this one," Claire said, sliding into the seat across from him without being asked, because she refused to let him think she was intimidated. "What are you doing here?" "Making sure the woman who saved my life didn't get fired for it." "I didn't get fired. I was lucky that nobody checked the supply closet inventory." She studied him, color back in his face, no visible strain in how he held himself, the wound clearly already tended by someone with real surgical skill. "Your surgeon does good work?" "Better than good. You bought him the time to do it." "I didn't do it for you." Came out sharper than she meant. "I did it because you were bleeding on my floor and that's my job." "No," he said, and something in his voice sharpened too, quiet and precise. "Your job ended the second you didn't hit that button. Everything after that was a choice." He hated that he was right. She hated more than some part of her. The part that had sat with Mrs. Alvarez for free, that had bandaged strangers in worse conditions than a Boston hospital closet, that had built her entire adult life around not turning away from people who needed her, recognized something in the way he'd said it. Not gratitude exactly. Recognition. "Who did that to you?" she asked. "The gunshot." That's not a conversation for a hospital cafeteria. Then what are you doing here, Dante? He was quiet for a moment, turning a coffee cup he hadn't touched between two fingers. You didn't ask what I was worth, he said finally, echoing the words he'd left her with 2 nights ago. You didn't ask my name until after you'd already decided to help me. Most people in this city, when they find out who I am, they either run or they start doing math about what I can do for them. You did neither. Should I know who you are? Most people in Boston do. I work 80 hours a week and sleep the rest. I don't exactly keep up with local celebrities. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile but close. Moretti, he said. My family runs shipping out of the harbor. Some other things besides that. Claire had grown up in this city. She knew the name the way she knew which streets not to walk alone after midnight. A name attached to warnings, to whispered stories about men who disappeared and debts that were never truly forgiven. Her stomach dropped, cold and sudden. You're Mafia, she said, quiet, careful, like the word itself might detonate something. I'm a businessman with a complicated family history, he said. But yes, if you want the word people use, that's the word. She should have stood up. Every rational instinct told her to walk away from this table, this man, this entire conversation, and never think about the brass button in her pocket or the compass rose tattoo again. Instead she stayed still, watching him, cataloging the exhaustion under his composure. The way his eyes kept flicking toward the cafeteria entrance like counting exits was reflex, not paranoia. Why tell me the truth? She asked. You could have lied. I'd have believed you. Because you've already seen the parts of me most people never get close enough to see, he said. Lying to you now would just be an insult to both of us. He stood, buttoned his jacket and set an envelope on the table between them, thick, cream-colored, unmarked. This isn't payment, he said before she could open her mouth. It's tuition. I did some checking. Your brother's a semester behind on what he owes. Claire's spine went rigid. I don't take money I haven't earned. I figured you'd say that. He didn't reach for the envelope, didn't try to argue her out of the refusal. Keep it anyway. Or don't. Either way, I needed you to know I noticed. He left before she could push the envelope back across the table. She sat there a long moment, staring at it, furious and unsettled in equal measure, and understood with sudden sinking clarity that whatever door she'd opened by not hitting that intake button 2 nights ago, it wasn't going to close quietly. She refused the envelope. She left it at the nurse's station with a note, I don't want this, and assumed that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 3 days later her supervisor called her into his office and told her, baffled, that Boston General's had received an anonymous 6-figure donation earmarked specifically for trauma equipment upgrades, the exact kind of equipment Claire had complained about for 2 years running. No name attached. No strings on paper. Claire knew exactly whose hands had moved that money. And she went home that night angrier than she'd been in months, because refusing him directly hadn't stopped him. It had just made him more careful about where he pushed. She showed up at the address her hospital badge had somehow impossibly been used to locate. A converted warehouse near the harbor that housed Moretti Shipping's legitimate offices, and demanded to see him. He met her in the lobby, unreadable, hands in his pockets like a man expecting exactly this. I told you I don't take money I haven't earned, she said. You didn't take it. The hospital did. Don't be clever with me. You know that's not the point. The point, Dante said, is that 11 kids a month come through your door with injuries your department doesn't have the equipment to treat as fast as it should. I have the money. You have the conscience that won't let you use it selfishly. I found a way to make both of those things true at once without asking you to compromise yours. She hated that his logic was sound. She hated it more that she couldn't find the argument to dismantle it. You can't just insert yourself into my life because I stitched up a bullet wound, she said. That's not how gratitude works. You're right. It isn't. He studied her, something more careful in his expression now. This isn't about gratitude, Claire. It was the first time he'd used her name. She hadn't told him. Someone had, which meant someone had looked into her badge number to full name to home address. And the thought should have terrified her more than it did. Then what is it about? I don't fully know yet, he admitted, and the honesty in it disarmed her more than any smooth answer could have. I know that in 11 years of running this family, you're the first person who's looked at me and seen a man bleeding instead of a name to be afraid of or a name to exploit. I don't know what to do with that yet. I'm trying to figure it out without making it worse for you. You're doing a pretty bad job of that. I know, he said, and for a second the composure cracked just enough to let something tired and human through. I'll work on it. She left more unsettled than when she'd arrived because some part of her, the part that had held Mrs. Alvarez's hand until the fear left her face, the part that measured people by their actions and not their reputations, had started, against every warning bell she owned, to believe him. The consequence came 4 nights later. Vincent Greco was a name Claire had never heard, would not hear directly for weeks yet, but his presence moved through the story like a current under still water. He was the man who'd put the bullet in Dante's side, a rival underboss who'd spent 2 years quietly eroding Moretti territory from the inside, using loyalty as camouflage. And now, through channels Claire couldn't see, Vincent had learned something that changed everything. A Boston general nurse had treated Dante's gunshot wound off the books, which meant that same nurse could place Vincent's men at the exact time and location of the shooting, if anyone ever thought to ask her. Claire didn't know any of that yet. She only knew that when she came home from a double shift, her apartment door was unlocked. She was certain, absolutely certain, she'd locked it, and nothing inside had been taken, but every drawer in her bedroom had been opened and left slightly, deliberately ajar, as if to say, "We were here and you'll never prove it." She called Sam before she called anyone else, hands shaking for the first time since the night in the supply closet. "Someone followed me from campus yesterday," Sam said, voice tight with fear he was trying badly to hide. "I thought I was being paranoid." "Claire, what's going on?" She sat on her kitchen floor with her back against the cabinets, staring at her open bedroom door, and understood with sick clarity that helping Dante Moretti had never been a closed chapter. It had been the first page of something much larger, and it had just reached out and put its hand on her brother. He called Dante. He answered on the first ring, like he'd been waiting for exactly this call. "Someone's in my life now because of you," she said, voice shaking with fury and fear in equal measure. "My brother's being followed. My apartment was searched. You need to tell me what I just walked into." There was a long silence on the line. When Dante spoke again, his voice had gone cold and quiet in a way she hadn't heard from him before, not directed at her but at whatever was coming. "Don't go back to your apartment tonight," he said. "I'm sending a car. Bring your brother. I'll explain everything when you're somewhere safe." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you until you're not standing somewhere I can't protect." She looked at her open bedroom door one more time, at the drawers left ajar like a warning, and made the decision that would change the rest of her life. "Send the car," she said. The Moretti family estate sat on 12 guarded acres north of the city, a stone house that looked, from the outside, like old New England money rather than what it actually was. Claire arrived with Sam at nearly midnight, both of them silent in the back of a black SUV, watching security gates roll open and closed behind them like a door shutting on the ordinary life she'd had that morning. Dante met them himself. He looked older than he had at the hospital, the weight of the last few days visible in the set of his shoulders, but his voice was steady when he showed Sam to a guest room and steadier still when he turned to Claire in the empty kitchen afterward. "You're safe here," he said. "Both of you. That's not negotiable." "Nothing about this is negotiable apparently," Claire said. "You didn't ask if we wanted protection. You just decided." "You're right." He held her gaze, and something in his willingness to concede the point instead of arguing it caught her off guard. "Tell me what you need and I'll adjust. I'm not trying to take your choices away from you. I'm trying to keep you both alive long enough to still have them." It was the first of 3 scenes that, over the following days, would quietly rebuild everything Claire thought she understood about him. Scene 1 came the next morning, practical and unglamorous. Dante found her in the estate's kitchen at 5 a.m., unable to sleep, and instead of retreating he made coffee badly, burned the first pot, and asked her, without any performance of vulnerability, how she'd learned to work a trauma bay so calmly. "Army," she said. 2 tours. You learn fast that panicking doesn't save anyone. You never talk about it like it was hard." "It was the easiest part of my life," she said, surprising herself with honesty. "Everything since has been harder." At least there the rules were clear. He didn't offer sympathy. He just nodded like he understood exactly what she meant and refilled her cup without asking. Scene 2 came 2 days later, and it was an argument, sharp and real. Dante told her flatly that she and Sam would need to stay on the estate indefinitely, that leaving wasn't safe until Vincent Greco was dealt with. You don't get to decide how long my life is on hold, Claire said, fury rising fast. I have a job. Sam has classes. You can't just lock us in a gilded cage and call it protection. It's not a cage, It's exactly a cage, Dante, it just has better furniture. She stood chair scraping back. If this is what protecting someone looks like to you, I understand a lot more about why you have a war on your hands. He didn't raise his voice back. He went quiet instead, and when he spoke again it was slower, more careful. You're right that I don't know how to do this any other way yet. Tell me what would make it not a cage. She thought about it, still angry but softening at the honesty of the question. I keep my shifts. You keep me safe getting to and from them. I make the call on my own risk and you don't override it without telling me why first. Done, he said and meant it, and for the first time she saw him not as a man used to giving orders but as a man actively learning, in real time, how to give her back the ground he'd taken without meaning to. Scene 3 happened on the fourth night, on the back terrace overlooking the dark water, when Claire found him alone with a bottle he wasn't drinking from and a look on his face she hadn't seen before. Not the composed boss, not the careful suitor, just a tired man carrying something heavy. My younger brother, Dante said before she'd even asked. Nico. He was 23. He wanted out of this life, wanted to run a restaurant, actually nothing complicated. I told him I'd protect him if he stayed one more year to help me consolidate the family's legitimate side. 1 more year. His voice cracked just slightly, just once. He was killed in a territory dispute that had nothing to do with him. I buried him believing it was my fault because it was. Claire sat down beside him without being invited, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. That's why you're so careful about what you're costing people, she said quietly. Not just me. Everyone. I'm terrified, he said, of becoming the kind of father who buries his own children in this. I don't even have children. I think about it anyway. I think about you and your brother in this house and I think, this is exactly how it starts. Protecting someone until protecting them becomes indistinguishable from owning them. Then don't let it become that, Claire said. You asked me what would make it not a cage. This is the answer, Dante. Ask instead of deciding. Every time. That's the whole difference. He looked at her for a long moment in the dark, something unguarded moving across his face. Nobody's ever explained it to me that simply. Most people around you have reasons to want you simply to control, she said. I don't need anything from you. That's probably why I can see it clearly. They sat there in silence that wasn't uncomfortable, the harbor lights blinking somewhere past the tree line, and something passed between them that wasn't confession and wasn't yet romance but was unmistakably the foundation of both. Two people, both accustomed to carrying everyone else, recognizing in each other someone who might for once help carry something back. It was Sam who broke the moment, jogging out onto the terrace, phone in hand, face pale in the porch light. Claire, he said breathless. There's a man outside the front gate saying he needs to talk to Dante. He says it's about a nurse named Bennett, and a night 2 weeks ago in a supply closet. Claire's blood went cold. Dante was already on his feet, hand at the small of his back where she now understood a weapon lived. Stay inside, he told her, voice suddenly all business, all boss. Both of you. This isn't over yet. The man at the gate was not Vincent Greco. He was Paulie Sarno, one of Dante's own captains, a man Dante had trusted for 9 years, and what he'd come to deliver wasn't a threat. It was a warning about one. Vincent's got a witness lined up, Paulie said, standing in the estate's front hall, rain-soaked and grim. Some contact inside the DA's office. He's building a case that puts you at the scene of a shooting 8 months back. The Renner warehouse thing. And he's got a photograph placing your nurse at Boston General the same night you were bleeding through a supply closet. He's going to use her testimony, twist it, make it look like she's covering for you. Or worse, he flips it, makes it look like you two orchestrated something between you. Claire, listening from the doorway despite Dante's order to stay back, felt the floor tilt under her. He wants to frame me. He wants to frame both of you, Paulie said. Kills 2 birds. Buries Dante in a case he can't talk his way out of, and removes the one witness who could ever place his own men at the actual scene of the shooting that put a bullet in Dante's side in the first place. Dante's jaw tightened, controlled fury replacing the tenderness of 10 minutes earlier like a door closing. How long have you known this? 2 days, Paulie admitted. I've been trying to confirm it before I brought it to you. 2 days you sat on this. I was protecting the family, Dante. You were protecting yourself, Dante said, quiet and lethal, while a woman under my protection was exposed to it. Claire watched something shift in Dante's face. Not just anger at Vincent now, but the first cold flicker of suspicion toward a man he'd trusted for nearly a decade. It would matter later. For now, the more immediate danger crowded everything else out. There's something else, Polly said lower. Vincent's holding a family gathering Thursday. Peace offering, he's calling it. An attempt to smooth things over before this goes further. He's invited half the families in the city. He'll make his move there, publicly, where you can't retaliate without starting a war in front of everyone who matters. Then I go, Dante said. Dante. I'm not hiding in this house while he builds a case against people I'm responsible for. If he wants to do this publicly, I'll meet him publicly. Claire stepped fully into the hall now, unwilling to be talked around any longer. I'm coming. Absolutely not, Dante said. You just told me on that terrace you were going to ask instead of deciding, Claire said, voice steady despite the fear underneath it. I was there that night, Dante. I saw things you didn't. I remember details about how he was shot that don't match whatever story Vincent's telling. If he's going to build a case around my testimony, I want to be in the room when he tries to twist it. Hiding from this doesn't protect me. It just makes it easier to frame in absentia. He looked at her for a long moment, visibly wrestling with every protective instinct he had against the promise he'd made her days earlier. If you come, he said finally, you stay beside me. No exceptions. Agreed. The days before the gathering moved fast and dangerous. Dante quietly began investigating Polly's 2-day delay, uncovering thin, unsettling inconsistencies. A phone call to an unregistered number the same night Polly claimed he'd first heard the rumor. Financial transfers routed through an account Polly had no obvious reason to touch. Nothing conclusive yet. Enough to plant a seed of doubt that would not stop growing. Claire, meanwhile, sat with Sam late one night and made him walk her back through everything he remembered about being followed. Plate numbers timing the exact intersection where the car had first appeared. Small, careful facts. The kind a trauma nurse collects instinctively, the kind that don't feel like evidence until suddenly they are. She also went back, alone, over her memory of that first night in the supply closet. The exact position of Dante's wound, the trajectory the bullet had likely taken based on the entry angle she'd examined with her own hands. If Vincent's people were about to construct a story about how that shooting happened, she was the only person alive who had examined the actual wound with clinical precision before anyone had a chance to alter the narrative. That detail, small, technical, easy to overlook, would matter more than anyone in the house yet understood. The night before the gathering, Dante found her on the terrace again, the same spot, the harbor dark and restless beyond the trees. If this goes wrong tomorrow, he said, I need you to know something. Whatever happens, whatever Vincent tries to make it look like, you were never a pawn to me. Not from that first night. I know, Claire said, and found to her own surprise that she meant it completely. That's exactly why I'm not letting you walk into that room without me. He reached for her hand, not pulling, just offering, and she let her fingers close around his. The first wholly voluntary touch between them, quiet and unhurried, more binding than anything spoken aloud. Thursday, he said, changes everything. One way or another. Then let's make sure it's the way we choose, Claire said, and not the way he does. Neither of them slept much that night. Both of them, in their separate rooms, ran the same sentence through their heads on a loop. Tomorrow someone's carefully built story was going to collide with the truth, and only one version would survive the room. The gathering was held in a hotel ballroom downtown, chandeliers throwing gold light over a room full of people who all in one way or another answered to fear. Claire had never stood in a space that felt so quietly dangerous. Every conversation a negotiation, every smile a calculation. Vincent Greco found them within the first 20 minutes. He was smaller than Claire expected, silver-haired, dressed in a suit too perfectly tailored for a man who claimed to want peace. His eyes moved over her like he was pricing something. The nurse, he said, extending a hand she didn't take. I've heard so much. I bet you have, Claire said evenly. Vincent smiled and turned to the room at large, raising his voice just enough to carry. I want to be transparent with everyone here tonight, he said. There's been a rumor that I was somehow involved in the shooting that put Dante in a hospital. Sorry, a supply closet, 8 months ago. I want to put that to rest. I wasn't anywhere near the Renner warehouse that night. I was in Providence. I have people who'll vouch for that. You said 8 months ago, Claire said before she could stop herself. But it was a supply closet on the night I treated him, which was 9 days ago. You just placed yourself at 2 different timelines for the same shooting. The room's murmur dropped into a sharp, listening silence. A simple mistake, Vincent said, smiling. It's not a mistake if you're the one telling the story, Claire pressed, heart hammering but her voice steady, trained calm, carrying her through it the way it always had in every code she'd ever run. I examined that wound with my own hands. Entry angle, trajectory, the position of the injury relative to his ribs. It's consistent with someone standing to his left and slightly behind him. Close range. That's not consistent with a warehouse ambush from a distance, which is the story I heard secondhand was originally being floated. It's consistent with someone he trusted standing close enough to pull a trigger without him seeing it coming. Vincent's composure cracked for exactly 1 visible second. Enough for the room to see it, enough for Dante standing rigid beside Claire to see it too. She's a hysterical woman making up medical fiction to protect a man she's sleeping with, Vincent said, too fast, too defensive. I'm a trauma nurse with 11 years of clinical experience, Claire said, and I'm telling this room exactly what I documented with my own hands before anyone had time to build a story around it. It was the detail only she could have caught, the one piece of evidence untouched by anyone's narrative, preserved by nothing more than her professional instinct to notice things precisely, the same instinct that had made her drag a bleeding stranger into a supply closet in the first place instead of turning away. The room's attention swung fully toward Vincent now, and he must have felt the ground shifting, because his hand moved toward his jacket too fast, too visible, and the ballroom exploded into motion. Guests scattering, security surging forward, Dante's men closing ranks around him instantly. Get her out, Dante said to his lead guard, low and urgent, already stepping forward, already putting himself between Claire and the drawn weapon in Vincent's hand. No, Claire said, gripping his arm, refusing to be moved. You confront him without your men risking their lives over it, and I'm the only one in this room who can slow bleeding if it comes to that. I'm not leaving. Vincent, cornered now, exposed in front of every family in the city, made his last desperate move. He grabbed a stunned guest as a shield and backed toward the ballroom's side exit, weapon raised. Nobody follows me, Vincent shouted, or I start using this. Dante stepped forward alone, hands visible, voice dropped into something low and absolute. Let her go, Vincent. This is between us. It was always between us. You buried your brother because of me, Vincent spat, and you never even knew it. Nico wasn't caught in the crossfire. I put him there. I wanted your empire, Dante, and I was willing to take everything from you to get it, piece by piece, starting with the person you loved most. The room went utterly still. Dante's face went white, then terrifyingly calm. The calm of a man who has just watched the last 4 years of grief reorganize itself around a single, unbearable truth. Then finish it, Dante said. Just me. Let everyone else go. Vincent, cornered, unraveling, shoved the hostage guest aside and lunged. And it was Claire, trained in 1,000 chaotic seconds just like this one, who saw the angle before anyone else did and threw herself sideways into Dante, knocking him off the direct line of fire as the gun went off. The bullet caught Dante's shoulder instead of his chest. He went down hard, and the ballroom erupted into full chaos. Security tackling Vincent, guests screaming, Dante's men swarming the exits. Claire was on her knees beside him in an instant, hands finding the wound with the same terrible calm she'd had that first night, pressing hard, steady, competent, refusing to let panic take the wheel. Stay with me, she said. You are not dying in a hotel ballroom after everything it took to get you here. Wasn't planning on it, Dante managed, breath ragged but eyes locked on hers, something almost like a laugh under the pain. Security had Vincent restrained within seconds. His own weapon, his own confession, spoken loudly enough in front of 24 witnesses that no amount of money or fear could bury it afterward. It was enough, combined with the financial records Dante's investigation had already uncovered and the timeline inconsistency Claire had exposed in front of the room, to end Vincent Greco permanently, arrested that night on charges that would keep him from ever threatening either of them again. The aftermath was quiet in a way the violence hadn't been. Dante was stable within the hour, thanks in no small part to Claire's steady hands buying the paramedics time. In the private recovery room afterward, once the adrenaline had drained out of both of them and left something rawer behind, Dante told her the rest of what he'd learned that week. That Polly's 2-day delay hadn't been fear, it had been complicity, a smaller betrayal tangled inside the larger one. Dante's most trusted captain had known more than he'd admitted, protecting his own position instead of the family he'd sworn loyalty to. "I'm exposing him," Dante said quietly. "Publicly. It'll cost me. Polly has allies and this will shake the foundation of everything I've spent a decade building. But I can't run something built on the same rot that killed my brother. Not anymore." "That's not a small sacrifice," Claire said. "No," Dante agreed. "It's the first honest thing I've done with this family in years." Claire sat beside his hospital bed, an actual hospital bed this time, no supply closet required, and reached for his hand the way he'd once reached for hers on the terrace. Voluntary. Unhurried. "Tosin. You saved my life twice now," Dante said. "Once with your hands. Once with your memory of what your hands had already done." "I didn't do it for you," Claire said, echoing her words from the cafeteria weeks earlier, though this time her voice carried none of the anger it once had. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." "I know," Dante said. "That's exactly why it means everything." 3 weeks passed before life found something that resembled steady ground again. Vincent Greco's arrest made headlines that carefully avoided the word mafia, and used words like organized business dispute instead. But Claire knew, and the city's other families knew, exactly what had happened. A man who'd built his rise on betrayal had been undone by a nurse's clinical memory and a boss's willingness to let the truth cost him something. The cost was real. Dante's public exposure of Polly Sarno fractured his organization in ways that would take years to fully repair. 2 captains left with Polly, taking territory and loyalty with them. Dante lost meetings, lost leverage, lost the easy certainty of an inner circle he'd once trusted without question. He didn't complain about any of it, not once, not even in the quiet moments when Claire could see the weight of it settling into him. "You could have kept it quiet," she told him one evening, sitting on the same terrace where everything real between them had started. "Nobody outside that ballroom would have ever known Polly was compromised." "I would have known," Dante said. "And so would you. I told you once that I was terrified of becoming the kind of man who buries people to protect an empire. Staying silent about Polly would have been exactly that, just slower." Claire's brother, Sam, finished his semester safely, tuition paid not through an anonymous envelope but through a scholarship Claire discovered, later and only by accident, that Dante had quietly funded through the university itself, structured so Claire would never have grounds to refuse it on her own terms. It was, Claire realized when she found out, exactly the kind of gesture he'd learned to make since that first clumsy attempt with the envelope. One that gave rather than took, that respected the boundary instead of testing it. She kept working at Boston General. That, too, had been non-negotiable, and Dante never once tried to talk her out of it again after their argument on the estate. The brass button stayed in her scrub pocket, worn smoother by another few weeks of shifts. One evening, closing up after a long day, she found Dante waiting in the hospital parking garage. Not with security, not with an entourage, just him, hands in his pockets, looking almost nervous in a way she'd never once seen from him. "I have something for you," he said, and held out a small velvet box. Inside was a medallion, the Moretti family crest, worn silver, clearly old, clearly meant to matter. "It was my brother's. Nico's. I've carried it since he died, thinking it was the only piece of him I had left to protect. I want you to have it. Not because I'm trying to bind you to anything. Because I think he would have wanted someone like you close to this family. Someone who tells the truth even when it costs her something." Claire turned the medallion over in her hand, throat tight. "Dante, I can't." "You can," he said gently. "And if you ever want to walk away from all of this, from me, from the danger, from everything this family carries, I'll let you. I mean that completely. I won't chase you, I won't send anyone after you, I won't make it complicated. You'll just walk and I'll let you go because that's what I should have understood from the very first night. Real protection gives you your choices back. It doesn't take them." He stepped back, giving her actual physical space, the offer entirely genuine. She could see it in the way he didn't reach for her, didn't wait expectantly, simply let the moment breathe. Claire looked at the medallion, then at him. A man who had learned slowly and at real cost, the difference between holding on and letting someone choose to stay. "I'm not walking away," she said and closed the distance between them herself, her hand finding his. "I'm choosing this. All of it. Because you finally let me." He kissed her then, unhurried and certain, the kind of kiss that felt less like a beginning and more like something that had already been true for weeks, only now finally spoken aloud. Months later, Claire still carries two things in her scrub pocket: her father's old brass button, and on a slim chain now, Nico Moretti's medallion, given freely by a man who finally understood what it meant to protect someone without owning them. She still works the same brutal shifts at Boston General. She still refuses money she hasn't earned. And she still believes, more firmly now than ever, that the moment you stop turning away from someone in need, even a stranger bleeding on your floor, you become responsible for what you build with them next. If this story stayed with you, I want to know what you think. Was Claire brave for saving a dangerous stranger, or should she have called security the moment he walked through those doors? Tell me your honest answer in the comments and why you believe it. If you love slow burn mafia romance where love is earned through sacrifice, not control, subscribe. The next story is waiting.